With President Trump traveling to Turkey later today for the annual NATO summit, a gathering of leaders from the alliance the president, of course, has long criticized and at times threatened to outright abandon. Trump is expected to push members to enforce their pledge from last year's summit to step up defense spending, a frequent grievance of the president toward the alliance. Trump is also expected, while there, to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as with Syria's new president. The war in Ukraine will likely be a key focus at the summit this week. Early today, on the eve of this gathering, Russia mounted its second major attack on Kyiv in less than a week, firing ballistic missiles toward the Ukrainian capital and killing at least 11 people, according to Ukrainian officials. Let's get started by bringing in MS Now international reporter Inez de la Cuetara, who joins us live from Ankara, Turkey. Inez, set the scene for us there on the ground ahead of tomorrow's summit. Iran, of course, will be a topic of conversation, but now also Ukraine.
Good morning, John, from Ankara, where you may be able to hear the call to prayer going off here. But yes, one of the big points of focus is going to be President Trump calling for allies to ramp up their defense spending. We know that was a big win for him last year when he got allies to commit to spending 5% of their GDP on spending. So I think this year you're going to see allies trying to prove that they are doing just that. We know that has been a big point of frustration for President Trump. He's talked about it time and time again. And just last week on Truth Social again, he said that it was ridiculous for the U.S. to maintain its relationship with NATO. He says it's a one-sided relationship because he says that NATO didn't show up for the U.S. in its war with Iran. So I think that's going to be a big point of conversation. We also got a briefing from the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker, who said that was very much going to be something Trump is going to talk about, that he's going to get allies to get on the road to 5%, and he's going to do that with urgency. So that's something we're watching. We are also watching Ukraine. Like you mentioned, we know President Trump has said he wants to now resolve the situation in Ukraine now that he feels that he has made progress on Iran. We know he spoke with the Ukrainian President Zelensky over the weekend. Zelensky saying that they had a very good conversation. Trump also spoke with Putin. They had a lengthy phone call, roughly 90 minutes. And this comes, as you mentioned, as Russia has really been ramping up its air attacks on Ukraine. We know overnight there were 68 missiles fired at Kyiv, 350 drones, at least 14 people killed, and over 100 people wounded. And I will say that's not coincidental that is happening right before this NATO summit gets underway. We saw the same thing happening right before the G7 summit, with Russia striking Ukraine on the eve of that summit as well. So Russia there clearly trying to send the message that, they still have the upper hand. They want to counter this narrative that they're not doing so well on the battlefield. And then just lastly, something else we're watching, I think, when you look at President Trump's personal relationship with world leaders here, the relationship with Giorgia Meloni is going to be a very awkward one. We know they have been feuding. This will be the first time they come face to face since President Trump claimed that she begged him for a photo at the G7 summit. She says that's completely false. And again, over the weekend, President Trump mocking the Italian prime minister.
MS Now international reporter Inez de la Cuetara reporting live from us at the summit site in Turkey. Inez, thank you so very much. David Ignatius, let's turn to you here. First, let's talk about Ukraine. Certainly, the headlines have been very bad for Russia in recent weeks. A real sense that Ukraine has some momentum here. They've shown the ability and willingness to strike deep within Russia's territory. But, as Inez just said, Russia tends to try to undercut these summits, both with violence, strikes at Kyiv, but also President Putin calling President Trump and clearly trying to butter him up and remind them of their allegedly great relationship. Do we anticipate any progress here at this summit?
Boy, progress is not a word that fits easily with Ukraine. But I think we're coming to a real crunch point in Ukraine. Putin's forces are increasingly embattled, cornered almost on the ground. Ukraine's mastery of drone technology has made it almost impossible for the Russians to advance. Their death and wounded rate every month approaches 40,000. It's a bloodbath for the Russians in Ukraine. And increasingly, Russia's getting hit at home. Its power facilities, its electrical heat grid are all now targets of Ukrainian deep strikes. So I think Putin is getting more and more concerned. What I'm beginning to hear from Western officials is a concern that Putin, feeling backed against the wall, may strike out in some way against other European NATO countries, that this is a period where NATO as a group has to be concerned about becoming a target of Putin as he seeks to escalate his way out of a crisis where he's not winning this war. So he's doing two things. He's bombing Kyiv as hard as he can. Last night was another example of that. He hit last Thursday, terrible loss of life in Kyiv, a new level of intensity of bombing, plus this threat that he may try to do something across the border in the Baltic republics, elsewhere along the front line. So it's a period where Trump is going to have to stand with the NATO alliance that he's not all that comfortable with, unless otherwise he's going to show real weakness to Putin.
And Elise, I mean, NATO has remained remarkably unified here about the war in Ukraine, despite Trump's efforts to undercut it. There'll be a lot of tension at this meeting. There always is. And this is just, we should always remind viewers, the one time that the Article 5 Self-Defense Pact was enacted in NATO was the rest of the alliance coming to the United States' aid after September 11th.
And for years, staying in Afghanistan as part of the war and the reconstruction effort. So NATO here looks pretty good. It really seems to be the United States that we're the outliers in how we discuss the war in Ukraine. And David, I want to hear about this briefing call you were on with the White House yesterday, because it's dramatically different. Their readout of what's happening on the battlefield was so different from apolitical national security analysts who speak about this war.
Yeah, I was surprised. And as David said, there are signs here that Ukraine is doing better than it has in this entire war. There are gas lines, forming all across Russia at this point, and so Putin's under a lot of pressure. And by some measures, they're actually taking territory for the first time. So there was reporters on this call with two U.S. officials yesterday. The first question was, will Greenland be brought up? And the answer from the U.S. officials was the best way to resolve Greenland is for the United States to acquire it. That's not going to go over well with the Europeans. The next question was essentially, and I asked a question about, has momentum changed? Do you see that the Ukrainians are gaining ground and that it's amazing, these drone strikes in Moscow? The answer from one of the U.S. officials was nope. The front lines have been frozen for the last 2 months. No progress. And I try to frame my question as, is this a moment for the U.S. to sort of join Europe in pressuring Putin to end this war? You have this momentum now. And the answer was essentially no, and that the U.S. is still considering withdrawing U.S. troops from Europe at a time when Vladimir Putin is growing weaker. And just one broad point on the cooperation of the U.S. war with Iran. As the NATO Secretary General pointed out, there were 4,000 to 5,000 U.S. flights, military flights from Europe during the Iran war. This narrative that Europe wasn't somehow supporting the U.S. and actually all countries in NATO are now meeting the 2% goal. The Nordic countries and Germany are on track to hit the 5% spending goal. To Trump's credit, he's gotten them to spend more money. That's all progress. You're not going to hear that from Donald Trump, I think, in Ankara. And
those European leaders, of course, weren't consulted about the Iran war. They didn't want that war to happen, yet they did in some limited way, mostly, help out. And Joe and I talk about this in the show all the time. It is remarkable how the White House is so out of step, seemingly, with reality about how that war in Russia is going. They simply refuse to acknowledge that Moscow does not necessarily have the upper hand.
Tough on Europe, easy on Putin. It's that simple, and so it was quite surprising, and just completely misreading European domestic politics. Just the mention of Meloni was critical. It's a political suicide for her to do anything and to cooperate in any way with Donald Trump because he's so incredibly unpopular in Europe right now.